Hoofbeats thundered through the mountains. One rider became 10. 10 became 100. By the time they reached the river at Sycamore Shoals, more than 1,000 men strong. Faces hardened by years in the wilderness. Frontiersmen with long rifles they'd carried since boyhood. The Revolutionary War was 300 miles away. Most of these mountain men had wanted no part of it. But a British major named Patrick Ferguson had sent them a threat. He would march over the mountains, hang their leaders, and lay waste to their country with fire and sword. That one threat would turn the tide in the South. Ferguson should have left the Overmountain men alone. Hello there, I'm your host, Jacob, and you're listening to Stories of American Legends. Far west of the American Revolution, beyond the Great Wall of the Appalachians, or in simpler terms, over the mountain, there lay a rugged frontier. Places like Watauga and Nolichucky. These were hard lands of thick forests, steep ridges, and fast rivers. The settlers were Scotch-Irish, German, and English stock. They had not settled here because it was an easy life. They built log cabins, cleared fields, and hunted for survival. They fought Indians when they had to. Because they were too far from the royal governors on the East Coast, they formed their own loose government called the Watauga Association. They were independent and stubborn, and they just wanted to be left alone. For most, the Revolutionary War felt like someone else's fight. 300 miles east, armies marched and cities burned, but here in the mountains, life went on. Some had ridden east to fight, but the war had never come to them. Until one man changed everything. In 1780, British Major Patrick Ferguson commanded Loyalist militia in the South. A skilled and innovative officer, he had even invented a breech-loading rifle. And from his perspective, the Southern theater was going exceptionally well. An entire American army of 5,000 soldiers had just surrendered to the British. And when Gates attempted to rebuild a new army, Cornwallis crushed him too. The British were confident that the South would be theirs soon. And no one was more overconfident than Patrick Ferguson. Ferguson sent word to the western settlements over the mountain that refused to support the king. He threatened to march over the mountains, hang their leaders, and burn their homes with fire and sword. That threat reached the frontiersmen like a spark on dry tinder. At Sycamore Shoals on the Watauga River, the frontier gathered. Over 1,000 riflemen, each man carrying his own gun and riding his own horse. This army had no generals, just militia colonels, each leading his own neighbors. Isaac Shelby and John Sevier had called the muster. On a rock above the newly assembled army of rugged frontiersmen, a preacher stood with a Bible in hand. His voice cracked over the water like a rifle shot.
The sword of the Lord and of Gideon.
1,000 voices roared it back. The Overmountain men had been awakened, and there would be hell to pay. The mountains did not make it easy. Cold autumn rain lashed the men as they climbed narrow trails. Horses slipped on wet rocks. Men struggled on foot when the paths became too steep. Food was short, but they kept moving. These woodsmen knew how to live off the land and endure hardship. They crossed the high passes, pushing through fog and early snow. Their powder and long rifles, far more accurate than smoothbore muskets, had to stay dry at all costs. And word spread ahead of them. As they pressed on, more and more men joined from nearby settlements, and the army grew. On the march, the colonels held a council and elected one of their own, William Campbell of Virginia to command. On the other side of the mountains, Ferguson learned that he had kicked the hornet's nest. The Overmountain men were coming for him. He fell back toward Cornwallis and sent word asking for reinforcements. But then he made a choice. Instead of running, he stopped. He took a strong position on a long, narrow ridge called King's Mountain. He felt safe there. On October 6, the Overmountain force reached Cowpens. It had swelled to nearly 1,800 strong. That night, they picked 900 of the best men on the best horses and rode through the darkness and rain. By the following afternoon, they stood at the base of King's Mountain. Ferguson would soon learn how wrong he was. The Overmountain men surrounded the base of King's Mountain. They attacked from every side at once. Long rifles cracked from behind trees and rocks as they climbed, their accuracy deadly against the Loyalist smoothbore muskets. Ferguson's Loyalists answered with volleys and bayonet charges to drive the frontiersmen down the slope. The mountain men had no bayonets. They didn't need them. They fell back, then turned and shot the Loyalists on open ground, all while yelling and whooping like devils. Ferguson rode back and forth across the ridge, blowing a silver whistle to rally his men. He wore a bright checkered shirt so his troops could see him. He cursed the men he looked down on, calling them backwater men, and he ordered charge after charge. But the Overmountain men would not break as easily as he thought. They reloaded on the run, took cover here, popped out there, and kept pressing upward. Again and again they surged up the slope, and each time they held more of the ridge. When the position began to collapse, Ferguson tried to cut his way out with a desperate charge. He was shot from his horse, his body riddled with bullets. With their commander dead, the Loyalist resistance crumbled. The Battle of King's Mountain was over in barely an hour. It was a crushing victory for the Overmountain men. The outcome of King's Mountain was decisive. Cornwallis was shaken. His plan to conquer the South had just lost a key piece. The Overmountain men had destroyed Ferguson's force and obliterated British momentum in the Carolinas. Patriot morale soared as more men joined the fight. King's Mountain didn't end the war in the South, but as Thomas Jefferson said, it was, quote, the turn of the tide of success. The victories that followed, Cowpens, Guilford Courthouse, all the way to Yorktown, started here on a ridge in the Carolina wilderness. But the Overmountain men didn't stick around for glory. Their work was done. Within days, most had turned their horses west to recross the mountains, back to the farms and families they had defended. They still didn't want to join the war. They were settlers who answered a threat, delivered it back tenfold, and went back home. And Ferguson was dead wrong. The Overmountain men weren't backwater barbarians, and they weren't just furious frontiersmen. They were American legends. Thank you for listening to Stories of American Legends. If you like this story, please subscribe and leave a 5-star rating and review. It really does help. And come follow me on X at History with Jacob. The handle is HistoryWJacob. I post stories from American history every day. Our next episode is Henry Knox and the Noble Train. How a 25-year-old bookseller led a daring winter expedition to drag heavy cannon across hundreds of miles of frozen wilderness to help Washington drive the British out of Boston. Don't miss it. But until then, stay legendary.